Many thanks and an honor to be talking with Dr. Diane Ravitch. Dr. Ravitch, you're an author, educator. You've written extensively about education and advocated for public education through blogging, and it's an honor to be talking with someone who's qualified to be Secretary of Education as well, if I may say so.
Well, thank you very much. I did serve as Assistant Secretary in the first Bush administration, and that was a while ago, but I did learn a lot about the federal government, and it's given me a lot of insight into what's happening right now.
No, you have a new book, An Education, How I Changed My Mind About Schools and Almost Everything Else. I'm curious about the seeds of how this new project came to be.
Well, I have written a lot of books. They're generally books about history and education or politics and education. And I figured I had one more book I wanted to write, and it's a memoir. And the memoir literally starts with I was born on July 1st, 1938 in Houston, Texas at 12:01 a.m. So I start at the beginning and I go through my life in Houston, Texas, going to public schools, having a very big family. I'm third of 8 children. And what it was like to live in a world without air conditioning, without television, without all the things that we're used to now. Remembering the day that World War II ended in Galveston, Texas. I was in Galveston, Texas, and then going through my college years and trying to identify the turning points in my life. And there were several turning points. At one point, after I was married, and I left Houston and married a very prominent New Yorker and had a fortunate life, to say the least, a very privileged life. And subsequently, we split, and I described that. And I moved on, continuing to write and to eventually join the sub-cabinet of the first President Bush. And at the time that I was in President Bush's sub-cabinet, I was very well known as a conservative in education. And it's not what a conservative is today. I was never MAGA. I was never racist or sexist or any of the things that are associated with being a conservative. I would say that I was very much in favor of meritocracy and test scores and things of that sort. So I joined the administration and advocated for high standards and believed in test scores. And then after the administration ended, I continued to be a very prominent conservative, believed in the same things, believed in charter schools. I was one of the very early advocates for charter schools. And then in the course of telling the story, I come to a point around 2007, 2008, where I am re-examining my views and come to the conclusion that the things that I've been saying and advocating for about 30 years were wrong. And what happened was that the things that I believed in were tried out in practice, and I realized they didn't work. And I changed my views over time, took a couple of years, and became a very strong advocate for public schools and an opponent of many of the things I had advocated for years. So I became an opponent of standardized testing. I became an opponent of using what's called accountability. That is, punishing teachers, punishing students, closing schools, and using this kind of carrot and stick approach to school reform. So I guess to sum up where I am now, I describe myself in the book as unashamedly woke. I was not woke when I was in the Bush administration. I was not woke in the 70s, 80s, 90s, or even the early 2000s, but I am definitely woke today.
Now, I've been an educator for around 18 years now, and have immersed myself in the system, and certainly glad to talk about your experiences really getting to know this system in all its shape and contours. What makes the U.S. education system, and particularly the public school system, unique and important?
Well, the United States was a leader in the world in the idea of providing free universal education. And even when it was free and universal, it wasn't really universal because we had racial segregation and we left out many kids. For instance, the kids with disabilities would not be educated or would be educated at home, but the schools, most schools, the overwhelming majority of schools made no accommodations for kids with disabilities. I happened to go to a high school that had kids with physical disabilities, not with emotional or mental disabilities. But it was unusual at that time, which was the 1950s, to be in a high school where there were children who were in wheelchairs. That was not common practice. So it has taken a long time, but we finally reached a point where we fulfilled a large part of our promise. That is, the doors are open to all children. We do not have purposely segregated schools. We certainly have segregated schools, but that's after many years of the government doing its best to be on the side of opening doors to all kids and trying to promote desegregated schools. That's been a very hard road because there's so much residential segregation, and also because there continues to be so much racism. And as we now see in the current administration and the Trump administration, there is a retreat from any effort to promote integration. And I would say that the Civil Rights Division is following the views that were commonplace back when I was a conservative, which is to say everything based on test scores, no special accommodations for kids who are kids of color, and they're opposed to affirmative action. I was opposed to affirmative action, so I know where they're coming from. But the civil rights laws supported affirmative action for a very long time. And I say in the book that I now recognize that although I didn't like affirmative action when it started, because I thought, as the Trump administration does, that it was favoring one race over another. In retrospect, I now understand that this had a profoundly positive impact on American society because many young people who were Black and Hispanic never had a chance. And they did have a chance to go to college. There were scholarships, there were incentives. They were told that they were welcome, and they had never been welcome in the past. And so consequently, we have a larger Black and Hispanic middle class than we ever have in the past. And that's very good for American society when there are Black doctors, Black lawyers, Hispanic doctors and lawyers, and Blacks in every profession. So I think that's it's the long-term impact on our society has been very good. And the current administration is doing everything possible to roll it back and to say that creating programs to help Blacks get ahead, very talented Blacks, to encourage them to find their special talents, that all of this is racist. And I think it's just profoundly wrong. But I've been on both sides, and that makes me understand where they're coming from, and also wish that I wish they weren't doing what they're doing because they're setting us back.
You mentioned a little bit about why the change in your perspective, getting to see some of the ideas in practice that you once believed. What's the change that you would like to affect, and anything else about that change in your own perspective that you'd like to mention?
Well, I'd say one of the areas where I had a big change of mind was charter schools. And at the very beginning of the charter school movement, I wrote articles. I belong to several very conservative think tanks, and I wrote articles with people also in the same think tanks, like the Thomas B. Fordham Foundation and Institute, which is based sort of in Dayton, Ohio, but actually in Washington, D.C. And I wrote articles on behalf of charter schools and saying they would be innovative, they would save money, they would be more successful, and they would seek out the kids with the most profound problems, the kids who had their head on the desk because they were bored, and that they would be the saviors of American education because they would be designed to do that. They would be accountable. If they weren't effective, they would be closed. Well, what I discovered was that was all fine in theory. When it hadn't happened, when we didn't have any charter schools, it was very easy to describe all the miracles they would bring about. But the reality is, when they came to pass, when the first charter schools were started in the early 1990s, they quickly became places that attracted entrepreneurs, people who were never educators, and people who wanted to make money. And so one of the things that I've saw happening was a lot of scandals where people opened charter schools simply because they counted up the dollars and saw how much money they could make by bringing in more and more kids. And then the next thing they discovered, or maybe simultaneously, was they didn't have to take the kids with disabilities. They didn't have to take the kids who were hard to teach. They could take just the kids with high scores, and then they could boast to the world, look how successful we are. All our kids have high scores. I mean, the most successful charter chain in New York State with the best test scores that outperforms most of the public schools. They don't want the kids with disabilities. They don't want the kids who act up. And they have a very high attrition rate because they'll accept a lot of kids in the beginning, but year by year, they push out the ones they don't want. And then they don't take kids. After the first year or two, they don't accept any new kids. So I recall that their beginning, when they first started, they accepted 100 kids. And out of that 100, 16 survived to graduate. So they have expanded, and they literally have billionaires on their board. And they brag all the time about how successful they are. But the success is based on attrition. The other area where they have very high attrition is among teachers, because they have a very strict set of rules, behavioral rules, both for students and teachers. And teachers just somehow don't like being treated like servants. And the rules for teachers were so rigid that the teachers have probably the highest turnover of any school in New York State. So it took a while, but I saw this happening more and more. I also saw charter schools where the people who founded them were pulling out millions of dollars. They were engaging mostly in real estate deals. And whoever thought of charter schools being a source of millions of dollars because of the ability to buy the land, rent the land to yourself, have the state pay the rent, get paid for tuition, get paid for all sorts of things, and then walk away with millions of dollars. I mean, the schemes are so elaborate. And the other thing that's happened that I personally found very objectionable was the creation of chains, charter chains. And the charter chains, well, KIPP would be an example. And I've visited KIPP schools. I've met with the founders of KIPP, and they're not bad people. They do some good work for some kids, but they're a chain of over 200 charter schools. And that strikes me as that's not what school's supposed to be. School is supposed to be part of the community, and it's supposed to be integrated into the community as part of kind of a building the strength of the community, giving parents a place where they can meet other parents and learn about how to affect change in their own community by meeting together, organizing, talking about the common problems, and then agreeing to do something about it. But if you're dealing with a chain that's like the school version of Walmart or McDonald's, it's not your school anymore. It belongs to that chain whose headquarters is someplace 1,000 miles away. So these are just, I would say the charters were a big one where I turned around. I kind of dipped my toe into vouchers. I was never a very strong voucher advocate because I do believe in separation of church and state. But I wrote one or two articles that were pro-voucher, And I am not at all pro-voucher today. I think it's vouchers have turned out to be a disaster. And we can go into that too.
Um, God, if I'm someone who wants to support public education, what would you say would be one of the major change agents that's at work right now? And if I'm a stakeholder, what can I keep in mind to support public education?
Well, I'd say the first thing to do, whatever state you're in, is to find the local organization that is working to support public education. And there are such organizations everywhere in the country because public education is under attack everywhere in the country. And so I'd say join up with that organization. I I co-founded an organization called the Network for Public Education. And the network works with local, state and local organizations all over the country, and we try to connect with them and also connect with other groups that are working together, civil rights groups and Save Our Schools groups, and there are many groups, and we do have an impact. And the thing is that neither party, certainly not the Republicans sadly used to be strong supporters of public education because they understood this was part of the community they served. But at some point, about 20 years ago, they decided that privatization was the way to go, that somehow the private sector was always better than the public sector, which is wrong, certainly wrong in education. And the Democrats have not been as strong and outspoken as they should be about public education because public education is a cause that most Americans do believe in. And the evidence of this is that whenever there's been a state referendum about vouchers, which would send public money to private schools and public money to religious schools and public money to homeschools, every single voucher referendum has lost. They've gone down, even in states like Kentucky in the last election, went 65% for Trump. But on the voucher referendum, they went 65% for public schools. So Democrats have really not been as active as they should be in saying, we are the party that will protect your public schools. That would be a great issue. They've really never gotten on that issue. And the reason, I believe, is that there is so much money behind privatization, and most of it has gone into the Republican coffers, but some of it has gone into Democratic campaigns as well. So, for example, Governor Cuomo in New York State got a lot of money from a group called Democrats for Education Reform. Now, the New York Times had a front page story recently about Democrats for Education Reform. They're pro-voucher. And this was an organization composed not of parents or teachers or students. It's an organization founded by Wall Street hedge fund managers. And why they call themselves for Democrats for Education Reform was that they wanted to create a pressure group within that claimed to be within the Democratic Party. I'm not even sure how many of their members are actually Democrats. For all I know, they might all be Republicans or unaffiliated. But what they're not in favor of public education. They started off being in favor of charter schools. Now they're in favor of vouchers. They're opposed to teachers' unions. They're everything that we know that is good for schools and students. They're opposed to. One of the things in my work that I've done is to, since I made this great switch from right to left, or right to liberal, or right to center, wherever it is I am, is that I've exposed a lot of myths. One of the myths is that you can evaluate teachers by the test scores of their students. Well, Democrats for Education Reform was gung-ho for that. Arne Duncan was gung-ho for that. The Obama administration really set that in motion. And that was an anti-teacher, anti-public school, anti-common sense approach because it failed and it failed and it demoralized teachers all over the country. And they used the Obama program was called Race to the Top. And it might as well have been developed by Betsy DeVos or Linda McMahon or some other member of the Trump administration because it was profoundly harmful to public schools. It encouraged states to authorize charter schools. It required states to evaluate teachers by the test scores of their students. And when states did that, and the Gates administration thought that was a great idea, when they did that, they demoralized teachers. They rewarded teachers that were teaching in affluent districts, and they punished teachers who were teaching children with disabilities and children who were struggling in school. It was really a very stupid idea. And the evidence from social science was completely against it, but they ignored the evidence and said, this sounds like a great idea. If the scores go up, then the teacher must be great. If the scores don't go up, the teacher is a failure. And that's whether scores go up or down has more to do with the kids and their home life than it does with the teacher. The teachers may be doing a great job and the scores don't go up, and it's got nothing to do with the teacher.
Yeah, I appreciate so much of what you've said about critical thinking in education, from looking at funding sources to thinking about graduation rates as data points, and speaking about this as far as a nonpartisan perspective as well, and thinking critically across both sides of the aisle. Anything that you'd like to say as far as a mission statement for education that we should think about for both now and as we're moving ahead, hopefully, into a future where these democratic ideals are supported and forefront?
Well, I would love to see a future in which the politicians would support the schools to do their very best and give them the funding they need to pay teachers as professionals and get out of the way. One of the things that bothers me a great deal is when legislatures decide that they can tell teachers how to teach, when they can pass a law saying you have to use this method and don't use that method. They don't, I mean, teachers, if they're properly prepared, know what method to use. They know a variety of methods, and they say, well, this child needs this, and the others need something else. And I know both ways of doing it, and I'm going to do what's right. What they don't need is a state law saying there's only one way to teach reading, science, history. I don't like the idea of the state mandating their version of history, because I would like to see teachers having the background in education to use primary sources and to teach children to think critically and to think about different sides of an issue. To say, well, on one side, people said this, and on the other, they said that. Now, it's very important that teachers understand that their job is not to tell children how to think, but to teach them how to think, to teach them to evaluate evidence. But beyond that, in terms of a mission statement for education, I would say that education in this country is deeply tied to our ideals about democracy, to our belief in liberty, freedom, justice, equality, and all of the ideals embedded in our Constitution and Bill of Rights. And we have a long history of striving to be a better democracy. And I would like to see the schools as part of the learning process about how to become a better citizen. And one of the jobs of a citizen is to make our society better and to make it better for everybody. I mean, the current administration is attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this strikes me as being undemocratic, because the reality is we are diverse. I mean, you can't get away from that fact. And in my book, I mentioned at the very ending, as I look at these concepts, that when the Olympics start, we see the teams come in from different countries, and the Japanese team is all Japanese, and the Russian team is all Russian, and the American team comes in, and we're everything. We're everybody. We have athletes from all over the world who've been in this country for one generation, two generations, five generations, and they are represent all the colors of the world and all the backgrounds, and they are all equal. So we don't strive for diversity, we are diverse, and that's just a reality. And one of the things that the schools do in democratic society is teach us to live and learn and work with people who are not from the same background as us. We learn to live and work with people who are different because that's the reality of the world today. You can't just be siloed in with people who share your views and your family's views and never hear a different point of view. So diversity is a reality, it's not an aspiration, and we have to learn to live with it. As far as equity goes, I don't actually see the difference between equity and equality. And that's always been an aspiration of our country. And I think right now, one of the problems the schools have is that there is so much inequality in this country that there are many, many children who are desperately in need. They're in need of medical care, they're in need of food, they're in need of shelter. And we've never had the extreme inequality, or maybe we did have it 50 years ago. Maybe we had it in 1900, but we're going backward in terms of income equality. When you see the charts and they show that the top 1% has as much income as the bottom 50%, that's troubling. And I read a book a few years ago called The Spirit Level, which was written by two British sociologists. And they said that the countries with the most equality are the happiest countries. There is less anger, less envy, less rage, and people feel that they have a chance no matter where they are. And I think that part of the reason there's so much violence in this country is there is so much inequality and so much hopelessness. And I think we would all be better off if we worked at making this a more equal country where people feel that equality of opportunity really is equality of opportunity and not just a hoax. As far as inclusion goes, I couldn't help but think about the years that I went to public school, which was from kindergarten through 12th grade. And every day we put our hand on our heart and we said the Pledge of Allegiance, which included the phrase, liberty and justice for all. Well, all means inclusion. All means all. It doesn't mean liberty and justice for few or for some. It means liberty and justice for all. So I see this as not woke. I just see this is who we are as Americans. And what we're going through right now is an effort to roll back what it means to be an American and to somehow revive the Confederacy. And I never thought the Confederacy was a great idea, so I don't think it is now.
One of the major emphasis points that I place in talking about stories and talking about books is the diverse range of stories, and that's a real strength. So I appreciate you speaking to the way that's a strength for the United States, and all absolutely does mean all, and it's not a word that can be used to erase experiences, nor should it ever be.
Well, you should not, you can't erase people. And I think a lot of that's going on right now, where there is an attempt to take books out of the library because they might expose you to points of view that people higher up don't want you to know about. But, you know, there's so many diverse sources of information these days that taking a book out of the library doesn't erase the book, and it doesn't really erase the point of view. It's just a mean-spirited effort to say, well, if they never read this book, they'll never know. But guess what? The internet is even more powerful than books. And kids, if they don't have cell phones, they certainly have access to computers. And the computer gives kids access to everything. So given that reality, I think it's very important that children, young people, have teachers who are well educated, who care passionately about developing their mind, their spirit, giving them the wisdom to make good judgments and giving them the idealism to believe that we can be better than we are as people and that our society can be better. But it won't happen miraculously by itself. We all have to work at it.
Absolutely, absolutely. We do our part, and as an educator, I love that part of what I get to do. Speaking of the empowering nature of knowledge, and being informed and being critical are empowering processes. So I appreciate that aspect of your work as well. I've had the chance to review the book and glad to share about it. That's An Education: How I Changed My Mind About Schools and Almost Everything Else. Did we miss anything that you want to make sure to include before we close out?
Well, I think you hit all the main points that, at least I hit all the main points I wanted to make, and you asked good questions. So I don't think
Wonderful.
that's the thing.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, a delight to talk with you and glad to uh, participate in the conversation anytime. And many thanks for your work and your advocacy.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.